Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today to talk about our newest parenting handbook, Raising Teens in a New Country, a guide for the whole family. Today we're going to talk about how you can use this handbook in your work with refugee families. We have a few logistics to talk about before we get started. If you need help troubleshooting during the presentation, please email us at info@brycs.org or use the chat box to your right. We will be recording and archiving this presentation, and if you've registered, all participants will receive a follow-up email with a short evaluation, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slides and the recording. We also have a copy of the PowerPoint slides at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, so you can feel free to download those and follow along on paper if you'd like. We will have questions throughout today's presentation, and we will hold a question and answer period at the very end as well. So if you'd like to participate, we do encourage that, and to do so, please also use the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. So without further ado, I'll introduce our presenter for today, who has also authored our BRYCS Parenting Handbook. We have Margaret McDonald, and she has worked on programs and services for refugee and immigrant and trafficked children for 17 years. She conducted program planning and evaluations, provided placement and follow-up services for unaccompanied and separated children, and run a national outreach and education program on child trafficking. She's worked with specialized refugee foster care programs, written on patterns and trends in the resettlement of unaccompanied refugee children in the U.S., and conducted research on the issue of child trafficking. She currently provides training and technical assistance on services to refugee and immigrant youth and families. And as I said, she authored our guidebook that we are talking about today. Finally, she earned her master's degree in social work from the Catholic University of America. Thank you, Margaret, for joining us today and talking about our newest book.
Thanks, Jackie. And I'm going to start with a quick apology. I have a bit of a head cold, so I'm going to try and keep my sniffling to a minimum, but please bear with me. So our objectives today, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the guidebook, how it relates to other BRYCS resources, a little bit about the content of the book, and talk about approaches for using the book, particularly a dual generational approach for using the book with families. I'm going to come back to that slide. I want to give you a little bit of background. So from 2006 to 2008, BRYCS staff interviewed a dozen refugee parents from 9 different countries, and we asked them to reflect on their parenting experiences before and after coming to the U.S. So they talked about subjects like discipline, respect, family roles and values. And after the refugee youth consultations that BRYCS had in 2016, they also did interviews with teens and found that a lot of similar issues were raised in the parenting interviews. And over the course of the years, there have been a number of TA requests that have pointed toward a need for this book. So there's just been kind of a general consensus of a need to address the challenges of raising teens in a new country. BRYCS also has 2 previous handbooks that have been some of their most popular resources. They've had record downloads and requests for hard copies. So one is Raising Children in a New Country, and the other is Raising Young Children in a New Country. And as you can see, both of these are available in various languages. And so Raising Children in a New Country was created for agencies who are working with refugees and immigrants to help support their efforts to make sure newcomer parents have the basic information they need about U.S. laws and parenting practices. And Raising Young Children focused obviously on younger children. It was created in partnership with the Office of Head Start's National Center for Cultural and Linguistic Responsiveness. And this handbook helps families with information on 6 themes that included things like family well-being, health and safety, healthy brain development, and so on. So the idea was to take this program to serving newly arrived families and others to help ease their transition into a new country and the challenges of raising young children. So I see the trouble with audio going in and out. I'm off speakerphone now, so hopefully that helps. So when you look at the copy of the PowerPoint, you can see that these are hyperlinks, so you can go directly to these resources and access them on the BRYCS website. So I did want to ask if any of you have heard of these other BRYCS illustrated parenting handbooks and how you've used them in your work. So there's the chat pod on the right that some of you have already started typing in, and we'd love to hear from you about how you're using these handbooks in your work. So our goals in creating this book were several. One of the main goals in the way we wrote the book was to help families know that every parent worries for their kids, and most teens are going to face a number of the issues that we address in this book. So for most families, the adolescent years are challenging, and for newcomer families, there's the added layer of adjusting to a new culture, new expectations, and a new context. So we wrote this book with kind of an eye to the impact of adjusting to a new culture, and to helping families know that it's not just them. They're not alone in dealing with these challenges. We also wanted to help newcomer parents take a step back and think about what they want for their teens, how they want them to grow, and to help teens themselves embrace biculturalism, which is a protective factor and often a strength for refugee and newcomer teens. And we wanted to give families a forum for sharing their opinions and strengthening their relationships with each other. So as you can see, in looking at the contents, we are going into some hot-button issues for families with adolescents: dating and relationships, online safety, drugs and alcohol, discrimination and bullying. And while I'm not going to go into the actual content in each of these areas, I am happy to talk about them if you have particular questions or want to talk about one of these particular areas and ways to address it, or ways that you found that addressing it with families has worked well. So feel free, again, to use the chat pod on the right if you have questions or issues about any particular one of these content areas in the table of contents. And as you can see, the guide is available both in Arabic and Spanish. Again, there are hyperlinks to both of those translations. So when you are accessing the PDF of this webinar, you can go straight through those links to the translations. Each section here is designed to stand alone, so you can bounce around to different topics that are of interest to you. It doesn't need to be read all at once. You can go to issues that are of particular interest or things that are, happen to be arising for families you are working with at that moment. We targeted the book toward newcomers who have low levels of English proficiency, or low literacy levels. So we kept the sections relatively short, also to make it easier for you to work with families. But we included additional resources at the end of the book to supplement each topic that we go into. So if there are particular issues that you or the families you're working with want to spend more time on, we've given you additional supportive resources you can use. As you can see, we tried to use visual reminders of tips or things to avoid. Each section is divided into two parts. One part is aimed at parents, and the other part is aimed at teens. So each section has, we can change tone or whatever emphasis or content that we're focusing on in those sections, particularly geared toward parents or toward teens. And most of the sections have conversation starters that can help parents and teens come together and start talking about these issues. So that leads to ways to use the book. We wanted to emphasize a family-centered approach, a community-centered approach that uses family strengths. So most newcomer families are coming with a wealth of parenting strengths and strategies that draw on their cultures and traditions and family experiences. And most families, most parents tend to be responsible and nurturing, and they've often sacrificed tremendously to bring their children here. Newcomer teens, especially if they've arrived at a younger age, have often already learned how to adapt to life in a new culture, have already developed some strategies. So we wanted to give you, working with families, a way to help those families draw on the strengths they already have. And as I mentioned, because each section is divided into a portion that addresses parents and a portion that addresses teens, we are focusing on a dual generational approach, which means there are various ways you can use the book. So families can read it together, discuss it together. Parents and teens could read sections separately and then come back together to discuss, particularly maybe using those conversation starters that we've included. And it can be used in culturally appropriate parent and teen support groups. Those support groups could be in the form of, say, having one relatively experienced newcomer parent of the same ethnicity as the participants and maybe one U.S.-born parent. Refugee and immigrant parents and teens can ask questions, try out new behaviors, and find positive support to help deal with each of the various issues that they're addressing. In whatever context you're using the book, there are various ways to incorporate it into your work. If you're in a child welfare setting, for example, you can use it in support groups similar to the support group I just discussed, or in counseling sessions with parents, with teams together, separately. In resettlement agencies, it can be used in any of your cultural orientation sessions, or case managers can pull out particular sections to work to discuss with clients as they're finding that issues are arising. In school settings, the book can be used in student support groups, in family nights at school, and this is where the standalone sections can particularly be helpful. You could have thematic nights that look at one or two or three issues at a time that deal with a particular theme, or issues that you're hearing are coming up with students. Parent liaisons can use it with parents and teens, either at events or one-on-one. So there are various ways to use it. And I'm interested to hear from you how you've used this guidebook in your work already. If any of you have used it, how have you used it? What approaches have worked for you? What's clicking with families, or even what's not clicking, and things that you find would be useful. So the guidebook has also been converted into an online training module, which includes pre- and post-tests to help assess the knowledge gained that service providers can use within a parent orientation, or families could use on their own. The other two guidebooks I already mentioned, Raising Children and Raising Young Children in a New Country, also have online training modules if those are of interest or might be of use in your work. and we have future plans for this guidebook. We would like to create additional translations. It's time-consuming and resource-intensive. So if you and your agency are interested in creating additional translations of your own to use, that is a possibility. You are welcome to do that. And there are a few caveats. And as you'll see, this is also a hyperlink, which goes to a BRYCS document that describes some of the copyright guidance and how, things that you would need to do if you were going to create your own translation. One of the key things to be aware of is that any translation you do would need to not use the illustrations in the book. So you would need to create a text-only translation that would be used side by side with the English version and the illustrations in the English version. There are other notes that you would need to put on your translation, including that it's not an official BRYCS translation, and so on. So you can find those details here in this document that you can get to through this hyperlink. We also plan in the future to do some simple audio versions for newcomers that have low literacy or no literacy in their native language, so they can listen to the book rather than read it. And I think some of you have already been answering this question on the right, but we're interested in what translation would be most helpful for the families you work with. And we'd also like to hear, have the families you've worked with expressed interest in getting more information on a particular topic that we've covered, or have they asked for additional topics that we don't cover in this guidebook? It would be useful for us as we consider revisions or standalone resources on particular issues relevant to newcomer families with teens. So that said, if you have answers for some of the questions, please put them in on the right. I see that people are entering languages that you think would be helpful for your populations, which is great. That's helpful to us. And again, if there are topics that families have expressed interest in, that we don't cover or that families would like covered in more depth, please share that too. And if you have questions, if you would like to talk about any of the content areas, or if you have other questions about using this guidebook, please use the chat pod on the right, and we would love to hear from you. So I'm looking at some of the languages. It looks like Swahili is a popular request. Dari and Pashto also looks like. And so interesting, I see that there's a request for more information about mental health and wellness. And that's something that we can definitely work on, and hopefully you also look at some of the additional resources in the guidebook itself on mental health and wellness to go into a little more depth on those topics. So I see the question, how can we access the links shared in the PowerPoint slide? So on the bottom right corner of your page, there's the webinar, the PDF version of the webinar. So you can download that, and within that are hyperlinks to all of the resources that I mentioned.
And I'll add, Margaret, when we send the follow-up email here with the short evaluation and a copy of the slides as well as the recording, I will add links directly to each of these resources and their translations.
Okay, great. And Jackie, I see that, I'm trying to scroll back up to it. There's a question, can we print the ebook on our site if we need additional copies to the ones you're able to provide? And so printing the guidebook is perfectly fine. Go for it. If it's easier for you to use print copies than online copies with your clients, that's terrific. Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think right now we don't have print versions to send out. So if you need print versions, it would be, you could just print it from the online version. Is that correct?
Correct. In the future, we do hope to provide nice hard copies, but we do not have that at this time. Should we have them available in the future, we will send out an email to our newsletter list letting everybody know that they are available. But as far as linking this resource to your website, so long as you're using our link, you're welcome to include it on your websites.
And I see that this is from a resettlement agency thinking of using this as a template for topics for youth adjustment group. Has it been used this way without the parent piece? So I haven't heard anyone discuss using it that way, but that seems like a great way to use it. If you have access to a youth adjustment group that's separate from, that wouldn't be used in conjunction with parents, that's fine. If it works for you and your group, these are topics that are going to be relevant for a youth adjustment group. So absolutely. And again, there are conversation starters in each section. So it would certainly be a good use of the guide to also suggest, as you're using this in your youth adjustment group, that kids go home and talk to their parents about the topics as they're coming up in your group. Talk to them about the questions they have or issues that arise. And I see at least one person that says the links in the webinar PDF are not live. So I don't know whether that's the downloaded version or the one that's over here on the left. I think that's true. The one on the left, those links aren't live, but they should be, Jackie, right, if you download the one on the right under shared files?
I'd have to check it once more again.
Okay. Okay, so not accessible in the download, but Jackie, you said it will be emailed out as a follow-up to participants, right?
Yes, I will email everybody direct links to each of our resources, but I've just dropped a link into the chat box to our publications page. And if you scroll down, all three of the handbooks that Margaret has mentioned are on this publications page along with their translation. So it's a good one-stop shop to get all three of the resources if you'd like.
And so I would say from my perspective and from I'm assuming from Jackie's perspective as well, we would love to hear, Jordan, how it goes in using this resource in your youth adjustment group. We'd love to hear if you adapt it in ways that work better, or if there are topics that come up that you'd like more information on, or that the youth in your group would like more information on. So we'd love to hear from you down the road in terms of how it goes. So does anyone else have questions, or can anybody else talk about ways that you have used this resource or the other two parenting handbooks that you found helpful in your work? So I see from Naila, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, that the images have been helpful, and we appreciate that. We worked hard on trying to get images that sort of capture the topic, especially in a way to make the content easier for those with low literacy levels, to kind of make it easier to grasp what we were trying to say, and also to make it more engaging for teenagers.
Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I would say that we'll close up shop today. We thank you for joining us and learning a little bit more about our handbook. Thank you so much, Margaret, for taking the time to talk about it today. And again, if more ideas come to mind as you're working with this handbook or working with your refugee families, please do not hesitate to email us. Our email and our contact information is now on the screen, so please do email us at info@brycs.org. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter, or we do have a toll-free number that you can call at any time for additional information on this book or any other technical assistance topic you might need help with.
And Jackie, I'm just going to jump in really quickly because we had one last question about whether the resources are copyrighted or can we print them and give to the families. Absolutely, you can print them. Excuse me, they are copyrighted, but if you're printing the full guide, the copyright information is on there. So you are welcome to print it. Go for it. We would be happy for you to print it out and use it with families.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Jackie, for facilitating. I'm super pleased that I didn't have to blow my nose during the entire thing. And I want to say thank you to all of you for participating. I hope that you find this resource useful as you're using it with your clients, and we'd love to hear from you about how it's going.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a very nice day.